What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best Self Blueprint. For those of you who have tuned in before, you know the mission of this podcast is to bring on people who inspire you to grow, learn, level up in your life, become the best version of yourself, and lay the blueprint on how to do so. So today, I am sitting for the first podcast we're going to release in the new studio, by the way, so that's where we are. I have my guest, Amy Cloute. So, Amy, thank you for hopping on.
Thank you for having me.
So, typically, I like to, you know more about you than I do. So, if you could just let people know kind of what you do in the health and wellness space and just kind of how we connected, and then we'll dive in.
Awesome. So, I do Reiki and energy healing as well as somatic breathwork, and I am trained in what's called the root cause practice. And so I kind of like meld those all together in a healing journey for people to journey on their own truly self-healing, because I truly believe that we are our own healers, and we just need guides to kind of help guide us on that journey. Reiki and energy healing it's just life force energy, and I just get to be the conduit to channel in energy to help people with their healing and releasing blocks and bring balance to their life. And yeah, it brings a lot of peace to a lot of people. My biggest love is probably breath work, and somatic breath work is like taking the breath and breathing for an extended period of time. So taking people more on a breathwork journey. And by doing so, the body holds a lot. Everything we experience in our life is experienced through the mind and the body. And so our mind has this great way of like creating stories and beliefs and like working its way through it. But the breath really allows us to release the things that we hold in our body, because we store a lot of stress, a lot of emotion that gets held in the body.
Like in our low back?
Yes.
So just that was an inside joke, but we'll let y'all in. So right before we did this podcast, I actually had Amy run me through a breathwork session. So we're definitely going to get into that, because there's some interesting stuff. I'll get a little transparent with everybody. But one thing that I told you this when we first talked on the phone, that I really appreciate is anyone who finds something that helps them with just a fundamental problem or challenge in their own life, and then they use that. It's like mess to message. You had a mess in your life, and then you like turn it into a message for others.
Yes.
And that's something we connected on, was both of us started coaching on the things that we coach on, because it was like needed for us to figure out for our own sanity, more or less.
Yes.
So kind of just run me through your story of like what popped up for you or in your life, in your head, where you sought out this style of healing. And then what was kind of the transition where you flipped the switch to be like, all right, maybe I should show some people what's up with this?
Yes. Honestly, I look back and I was a person with held a lot of anxiety. And I didn't really know that. That wasn't something discussed or talked about in my house. And so now in retrospect, I was a doer. And I was like, I can't be still. I always am doing. I don't really sleep. Who needs sleep? Like, I'll sleep when I die. Like, kind of mentality. I was like always going, always doing. And I got into yoga, and that was my first step. That was a huge step for me to even slow down like movement into a yoga practice. And I always wanted to be, like, I craved to be a meditator, because I thought that was so cool and that'd be so great. I'm just going to sit and meditate. When I would sit down and get quiet, that felt so anxious to me, because all of a sudden, all of the to-do list, all of the thoughts, all of the things I really wasn't facing in my life would rush in. And then I would abandon the practice, get up, go back to doing, because I'm like, I can't be, it felt so uncomfortable. And I'm one who I always believe, like, my soul leads me to things, and I sign up for a lot of things, and I would try things all the time. And I had tried a breathwork course with somebody I knew. She taught breathwork every Sunday night online. And so I'm like, oh, I'll try this breathwork thing. I was blown away, because I liked it because it was kind of active still. Like, I am breathing and I'm like using my breath. But I realized how much stuff I was holding in my body, how much like stress, how much anxiety, how much resentment. I had like just so much. I was angry for things that had happened in my life, how much I was holding in my body that I was allowed to release through my breath. And then once I cleared all that out, then I could be quiet and then I could be with myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is that space, that meditative space that everybody talks about,
Yeah.
that I've always wanted to feel, and that deep peace. And so I started doing breath work on a pretty regular basis, like the longer hour-long breath work sessions. And I was like, wow, like this is something for other people who struggle like I do, in that like I can't just sit and meditate. I just can't be with that. It became the safe way for me to release everything I was holding on to within my body. And so, as I always say, like I was so full. Like your body fills up. I always use a comparison. It's like the trash can is so full of all of the things I was holding in all the time, of like, don't be mad at them. Don't be sad. Don't cry. Don't be angry. All of that stuff I was holding in. And then the breath allowed me to just release and process through all of that. And then I could be quiet. Then I could be in this like stillness afterwards.
Yeah, that trash can analogy is so perfect because what we just ran through, it really does feel like that. It feels like, and I like I was telling you so many times today, like I have the level of awareness to know when my trash can's getting full. But this was a unique instance where usually, again, with the stuff that I've gone through in terms of what I've learned, what practices, systems to figure it out, I'm usually able to at least get some of the stuff out of the trash can. But it seemed like there was something that just wasn't letting me empty it out. And it really is, like, it's true. Just whatever, and I'm sure you can dive into this more, but whatever it is in that breathwork experience, it just lets you, it's like emotionally picking up the garbage can and just dumping it off the edge of a cliff. Like I think for me it was more the what if garbage can of like all of these unknown variables are starting to stack. And there's less and less known variables. And so it's like, what if this? What if that? And then we come out of left field and it's something that has nothing to do with that. But it's still, still emptied the trash can. So when did you start? Because you went from feeling the need to empty the metaphorical garbage can. And then eventually you started getting into it, probably researching more, learning more, studying it. When was it that you started thinking about or realizing in the world how needed this actually is?
Probably like 2 months in. I probably did breath work for like a good 2 months, and I really started to see the shift in myself, because when you're consistently emptying that garbage can, how I showed up in my life and for other people was so different. I wasn't as reactionary to people, to things. I wasn't as triggered. I like had this much more grounded aspect to myself. I handled the day-to-day stress so much better, because you're not like, when the garbage can is full, one little thing can set you off, right? And then you're just like, oh my gosh, I got to get through this line. So like, why isn't this clerk at the all the little things in life that like irritate you, stress you out, like trigger you, make you angry. Like I didn't have that anymore as much. Like I was not as reactionary. And I was like, wow, I really like who I'm showing up as so much better. I actually get to show up as my best self, and I'm not so reactionary. I don't feel so stressed out. I handle, the ebbs and flows of life so much. And I always say it, like, we don't get to control the chaos of the world. Like, we don't get to control all the things that happen. We don't get to control the accident now that's going to make you late. We don't get to control, like, so many things in our life. We get to control us and how we react or don't react and how we show up to that. And I just realized through breath work, I was just at such more grounded and peaceful state that I just got to be the calm in the storm all the time. You know, I was so much calmer when the rest of the world is like chaotic and all the factors we don't get to control, and just getting to be more present.
Well, and I think another thing too that, and I guess this might be a good time to start jumping into the experience I just had, is you can have all of these logical reasons why you think the garbage can is full. So I think about it like rocks in a backpack or weights in a backpack. So like there's logical things that you think are creating the rocks in the backpack, when in reality your emotions are latching onto something entirely different, but you're reacting to your immediate environment and expressing the frustration and things that have nothing to do with why you're frustrated. And that what was so interesting about this is, I mean, for those of you who are listening, when we sat down, she asked what my intention was. And I was talking about next steps in business and getting clarity around that. And as I laid down, I felt just some tightness in my low back. So logically, I was telling you, I was like, oh, I didn't stretch this morning, so I'm probably just feeling a little tightness. And as we started working through, I started filling up the stomach part of the breathing, where it almost like kind of pressed on that a little bit. And as soon as I started applying pressure, because you were saying like build the space in your body to kind of clean out what needs to get cleaned out. And as soon as it hit that space, it just immediately let loose so much trauma, so many memories, so many things that, again, had absolutely nothing to do with what I thought my intention was. Yes. But as soon as it was so undeniable, it was like, all right, this is the work that needs to be done. Yeah. And it was like physical touch and, past relationship trauma and things that have nothing to do with, directly nothing to do with my business. But just because it's not a logical tangent or correlation doesn't mean that's not the exact thing that's been tripping me up, getting me frustrated, all those things you were talking about.
Right. And that's the thing. It's so, our humanness wants to have an expectation, or I always ask people what is your intention? What do you want to call in through a session? What do you want to receive? What do you want more of in your life? And I would say 50% or more of the time, whatever the intention you go in with and what you receive are two totally different things. Mm-hmm. Because it's always trusting that whatever you need to receive is going to come through the breath work. And when we breathe, I was explaining to him before, kind of the I hate to say science-ish, but kind of the science is, a lot of times when we do this breath work, we're breathing a lot through our mouth and strictly through our mouth, contrary to what we want to do in our day-to-day life, which is breathe through our nose. And by doing so, it actually starts to trigger our limbic system, and that holds a lot of memories and a lot in our subconscious mind. So unfortunately, we think the conscious mind is what drives our day-to-day life, but our subconscious and a lot of things that happen to us and limiting beliefs and beliefs that were created so long ago still live in our subconscious mind. And when we start to do breath work, a lot of those things get drawn forward and start to show up and appear of oh, whoa, this that happened so long ago is actually the thing that's blocking me. That's actually the thing I've been holding on to. Because truth be told, when in our life do we deal with a lot of that stuff? We don't. Yeah. We don't. It's we just kind of go on.
Move to the next thing.
Move to the next thing. Move to the next thing. And a lot of those things still live within our bodies, still live within our subconscious. And that's actually what's tripping us up. And we don't even know it,
Yeah.
And a lot of people have these things that come up, and a lot of times breath work for a lot of people can be emotional, because all of a sudden these things that you've been holding on to, whether it's yours or things you've taken on, beliefs that aren't even yours. Mm-hmm. Honestly, my business is called So Fully Grounded, and it comes from the concept of being so fully grounded in who you are. And so using the breath, it starts to clear out everything and all the noise and all the beliefs and all the things that have happened to us to get us back down to you, to the core of who you are, what you desire, what you want in this lifetime, and it peels back the layers upon layers upon layers.
Yeah. So something I'm always curious to ask people in your position, because you've done workshops, you've worked with people one-on-one. We were just talking about like the based off of that subconscious emotional, again, trauma experiences, whatever's, lurking in the depths of that space. There's an energy wall that can be created. So like I just experienced, I had a very hardened energy wall, if you will. This is my little metaphorical energy wall, and it just felt so like hardened from the years of subconsciously leaning into that belief. And again, it was one of those, I was so unaware of it that I knew something was blocking me, but I had no clue that was it. I wasn't even in the right area of my life. So what is something that you see is, I guess, like a common wall that people have up that then relates to like a physical thing in their life? Because we were talking about people who exercise, eat well, do all this stuff, but can't seem to lose the weight. There's some type of energy wall that then manifests into a physical like barrier between them and the world outside.
I mean, the body, our tissues, our organs, our cells hold on to so much of our emotions, so much of our trauma. And like I was explaining to him, because his past, when he works in doing like physical training with people, mindset work, I said there's so much research and knowledge on so many people who they're like, I swear I'm not cheating, I'm like eating exactly what you tell me, I swear I'm doing my workouts. Like they're doing all the things and they're checking all the boxes, and they just are so frustrated because they're like, I just can't lose the weight, like it won't let go. Like a lot of times for people who've had a lot of emotional things happen to them, or trauma to them, or abuse, like not only do we energetically create a wall, right? We're like physically, and our hearts kind of close down to all of that. A lot of people hold weight and put on physical weight because it also then creates a physical barrier between you and like the world, right? And so until you like get down to the root cause of like where those emotions are, what happened to them, the traumas, and they actually release that and process that through the body, through things like via breathwork, they're going to always kind of hold that and always be frustrated, because it's like it's living within them, and their subconscious is creating this physical barrier, physical wall between them. And so there's so many like so much more knowledge, and so many more like I think avenues are opening up beyond like how our emotions, how when I say trauma, it can be something huge, and it can also be the littlest things. It is not can be to be compared to, it can be, broken up with in second grade, I mean, from your second grade boyfriend, and you're like, remember that. But it's like those little things that we keep in our memories, we also store energetically in our bodies, that like creates these blocks and creates these barriers for us. 40 years later, we're still holding on to that in some way, shape, or form that's not allowing us to move forward in life in the way we want to and in our fullest capacity.
Yeah. So what, from the lens of someone who, again, you do this stuff regularly, you coach people doing this stuff, just kind of going through the world right now, we talked about, what season we believe the world is in, and but what, as a coach and just as a practitioner of these things, what is something that you just kind of see in the world that, people could use advice on, or just your expertise or your perspective on, kind of going through like every day?
We're like being fully present in now, because we're like being in the actual now and being with ourselves now. Because a lot of times we're either dragging the past, our past beliefs, past experiences, everything from our past we can project onto our future, right? Well, because this happened to me last time, I was cheated on in a relationship last time. Now you tend to drag that, like, okay, now I'm scared that every like, how much of our past do we project onto our future? And so a lot of us live with these past beliefs because it created a story for us. And so we're like not really present. And then to be present in this moment, we're so distracted. Whether it's phones, social media, the news, like there is so much to distract us these days that we're never really like here, present, like with ourselves in this moment, or we're worried about the future.
Yeah.
We're always in the worry of the future, right? We're always going, but what if this happens and what if that happens? That's where a lot of anxiety is created, is living in the future, about living in the what ifs, what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. And that's why I like breath work, and even not even like the long breath work journey that I just took you through, which is, you know, about an hour long. Even using our breath on a day-to-day basis to like get grounded. Take 10 deep breaths in the morning before you enter the world, and all of the noise, all of the distraction, everybody wanting our attention, wanting something from us, you know, whether it's your kids, your coworkers, everything. Can you just get grounded and like, who am I? Like, how am I going to show up today? Can I just like bring my energy in? I always tell people at night, when you lay down in bed, how often is your mind racing on things to do tomorrow? Don't forget that all of the things, replaying conversations you've had throughout the day. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said this. I wonder, I mean, this is our humanness. Taking 10 deep breaths just to be like, let's like exhale out all of that. Can I be here now? Because there's no, if you're here right now in this moment, like there's no anxiousness in that. There's no worry. There's no nothing.
Yeah.
You know? There's so much noise and distraction in this world, and everybody wanting your attention, you know?
Yeah, I call that, at least for, we'll kind of talk about the morning piece of it. I call that proactive versus reactive living. Now, I've been very naughty with that. I have not been intentional recently with my mornings.
Yeah, it's okay.
But again, it was one of those, I knew that a few of my practices have fallen off in the last few months, so it was just perfect timing to do this podcast, sit down with you, do that, just kind of reset a little bit. But it is so true. I mean, most people, they wake up from a phone alarm, and then at that point, you're waking up to grab your phone, and you have texts from people, social media notifications, news articles, all these things that are externally influencing one's energy out the gate, and then you're back on your heels. And then all day, it's just information and obligation and distractions kind of getting pushed. And it is really difficult. If you start the day back on your heels, it's very difficult then to switch over and lean onto the toes. And so that is something I very much agree with, is the more time you can just keep, I'll say, like, just respect the first hour, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it takes, and do the practices to almost like prime yourself, like physically, what do you need, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And then one thing I wanted to, because this is just something I'm curious about, when I do breath work on my own, I'll typically think about like breathing in the positive and visualizing like basically like positive energy particles getting sucked into my body, and then breathing out the negative. Do you have different strategies? Like, because I've met so many people, and I'm sure doing what you do, you have too, where people are like, well, I breathe all day. So what are a couple of the kind of tricks or strategies that you have to help people just like get in the right mental framework for doing intentional breathing?
Right. One, yes, we breathe all day. Most people, if you pay attention to your breath, we breathe from our chest. So we don't take like deep belly breaths, like filling up our belly, expanding our breath all the way to our lungs. We are like a very stressed, anxious society. And so we breathe these short, shallow breaths and we stay in our chest. Like, honestly, a lot of people, when you first take a deep breath, breathing in through your nose and filling your belly all the way up, it actually is uncomfortable because we're not used to that, one. Secondly, we're a six-pack ab society. Let's be real. What's the first thing you do when you take a photo, right? Everybody stands up and they suck it in and they stand, right? Like, let's honestly, how many people are like, oh, we always are sucked in. And so what does that do? It pushes the breath up into the chest, and we don't actually like Buddha belly, like really let that breath in. And our body needs oxygen. So many people are tired in the afternoon, especially if they're talking and like they're out and about a lot, because they haven't actually taken a breath in. And our brain doesn't have the oxygen. Our blood is not like getting the oxygen it needs.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, like, honestly, taking 10 deep breaths, you'd be amazed at like what it does for your body and your nervous system and just bringing oxygen in. So yes, we breathe all day. Most of us don't breathe great.
That's something that doing this long enough, I think it's hilarious how, like, as a baby, the first things you learn are like talk, walk, eat, breathe, move. And then, you learn all the complexities that come with life. But it seems like for a lot of people now, it's getting back to, how do you breathe right? How do you walk right? How do you sleep right? How do you eat right? All of these very like foundational building blocks of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
But there's just such a great separator between people who do the little foundational things the right way and the people who don't.
Yep.
Just in like how they experience life, right? Like, are they in a grateful state or a miserable state?
Yep.
Are they able to express themselves or are they not? Just all of these little things that make such a profound impact on the entire human experience. But yeah, so that's why I was curious about that, is because I knew you would get comments like that. So I was curious what your kind of like shift is for people who they're like, look, I'm breathing right now. I wouldn't be alive if I wasn't.
Right.
So like
And
what's
honestly,
that next step?
like they always say, I mean, like the world, they argue like whether it's 6 deep breaths or 10 deep breaths. Like, I love the breath because you can change, you're actually changing the physical state of your being. Because when you take a deep breath and you actually allow your mind to follow your breath, one, you're slowing your mind down, and two, you're bringing oxygen into your body and you're alkalizing your body by bringing that oxygen into your body, and you're like actually changing the physical state of your being. So not only do you start to slow your mind, you actually change the physical state of your being. So you take your nervous system from this fight and flight to like rest and digest, like, because you're actually changing that physical state of your being by taking some deep breaths. And so it's like, if in a practice, I'm like, I always like to keep it simple. How do you keep this practical to, it's great to do a journey like I just took you on. I mean, those are fantastic and they serve a great purpose. But how do you do this in your everyday? How do you implement the breath into your everyday life?
Yeah.
In the morning, I always like to how do you want to feel and how do you want to show up? And using the breath to breathe that in and anchor that in to who you are. Like, I want to show up as like really grounded. I want to show up as peaceful. I want to show up as patient today. Like, as you say, you're like kind of like back on your heels. I always say, otherwise you enter the world as a punching bag and like you're just taking hit after hit and everybody's punching you around in whatever direction, versus being like, okay, I'm like grounded in who I am, how I'm showing up. And yet that like the world affects you less than in that way. And then throughout your day, like in between meetings, in between like picking your kids up, I always say the car is a great like space. Like sometimes between, so many people work from home. So I say sometimes in between a meeting, or if you do drive to work, before you walk into your house and you face your kids, your husband, I got to make dinner, help with homework, taking a few moments to take a breath. Like, how do you let go of the workday? How do you get grounded before you step into that next, like, area of your life. Like, take a few breaths. You just got off of a meeting and like you're angry, you're mad, you feel flustered, you feel overwhelmed. Okay, what if you take 10 deep breaths or 5 deep breaths to be like, okay, before I jump on to the next thing, how do I let go of what just happened? Otherwise, you're not fully present again because you're reeling from what just happened and you're dragging it into like now. And now you're at a new meeting with somebody else and you're really not present with them. You're not giving them your best self.
Yeah. Yeah. I call that energetic residue. So like, it's that ability to, like you said, just create enough space between the activities and experiences throughout the day so that you are going in fresh. So I think about it like painting a wall.
Yeah.
If this wall behind us was brown and we wanted to paint it like a bright orange, we wouldn't just paint a coat of orange. We would prime it and then we would paint it orange. If we just painted orange, there's all that stuff from before coming through. And that's kind of how I view it very similarly, because it's like the version of me who's, going to try to close a business deal and the version of me who's going to have lunch with my grandmother are two very different versions of me. And so if I bring the energetic residue from the business deal into lunch with my grandmother, she's not going to be very happy with me probably. Right. And so just thinking about, that I love that idea of, and I think that brings in the presence too, that you were talking about is so important, is are you allowing the things, even if it's as recent past as 30 minutes ago when you had that, bad phone call or bad conversation or whatever it may have been, is the past getting dragged with you, like you said, back home, back to hanging out with your friends, back to whatever is next. And it's such a simple thing to do, which makes it such a simple thing not to do.
Right.
But
well, it's the one thing I always say, the breath. It's always available. It's always free. Just tap in. Like, you don't need anything. You don't need a phone. You don't need somebody else. You don't need to pay for it. You don't need to make an appointment for it. Your breath, it's always available. It's always free. You just have to remember to tap into it. Because how you can physically change the state of your being with your breath is amazing. As much as too, I'm like in breathwork, you can play. I mean, I've learned so many breathwork techniques and you can play around with it. As much as you can use the breath to, calm the nervous system, calm the mind, bring everything down, you can play around with the breath and you can like energize yourself. They always say get high off your own supply. Like you can like use breath. If you breathe really fast in through your nose and like really jazz up your breath, like you can wake yourself back up. So like you can do so much just with breathing and just with your breath. And it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't need anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that's what I think is so cool about a lot of this stuff is once you equip yourself with the knowledge, it's fairly simple practices, right?
Yeah.
I am curious because you said, how long were we doing that? The breathwork session for? Yeah.
It was about 45 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do people usually say that it feels like it goes a lot quicker?
Oh, yeah.
Because that felt like it was like maybe 15 minutes.
Yep. Yeah. So the breathwork journey I just led them on, it's about 10 minutes long of just like a meditation, just getting like people grounded, just kind of feeling awareness and relaxing into your body and being present. And then you actually actively breathe for over 25 minutes.
Wow.
And so then we do certain breathwork patterns, breathing for over 25 minutes. And this is done laying down because you do take in a lot of oxygen. You kind of feel lightheaded, a little euphoria goes on. And then kind of 10 minutes of just like grounding, allowing once we're done breathing, just to be with things that come through and being in this nice space of like peace and rest and whatever for the body. So, yeah.
And you do a really good job, I will say, of, because you did prep me. You were like, there's going to be stages at which it feels like the things are coming up. Yep. There's going to be stages at which it feels like you have to let go of those things. There's going to be stages that'll feel maybe a little more peaceful and slow. And so just doing the proper expectation setting of like, look, this isn't all just going to be you breathing. This is going to be like, there's different pieces to this puzzle.
Yep. Yeah.
But I think what's so cool to me about it is, like I was telling you, and you probably even noticed me like shivering a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
was when something hits, it's very noticeable.
Yeah.
Like when there's an emotional release, there's a physical shift that happens
Yeah.
almost immediately. So like for mine, when there was the emotional release, when I finally like found that spot, was able to like carve out the space and then experience the memories and release it, the next breath, I think you saw I like tucked my arms under a blanket because I was like, oh wow.
Well, honestly, emotion is just energy in motion. And
Mm-hmm.
so once like I mean truthfully like we are meant to feel such a wide range of emotion. I mean, I forget how many thousands of emotions like exist. And we're meant to experience something, feel the emotion and let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you notice children, like toddlers, who haven't been programmed by society of like what's appropriate, what's not, how they should feel, how they should not feel, they can go from like completely crying to laughing in like a snap of a finger. They're like in dead tears and they're all upset about something and then they turn around and then they're
Mm.
laughing. It's just emotion is energy in motion. And so when you're doing breath work, you're releasing those emotions, which is energy. And that's why a lot of times people will feel tingling. They might feel pain or discomfort in their body. That is where emotions being held, or like memories in the form of those emotions are being held within the body, within the tissues, our organs, our cells. And once that releases, like the energy gets flowing and we're
Mm-hmm.
oxygenating the body too. And so a lot of people do tend to get cold, I would say more so, as like all of this stuff is like being released from the body
It was
through
crazy. I
the
mean,
breath.
it was almost instantly.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
I know a little bit of how that stuff works, but I have never experienced it that like
Yep.
it was like again, the exhale happened and when I started the next inhale,
Like that rush of cold.
immediately my body just got cold and it really did feel like it was because it was more like I was saying like aggressive, not angry energy, but
Yep.
more of that like hot energy, if you
Yep.
will. And it seemed like there was just so much of it pent up that when I did release it, my body was like, oh, that's been like heating us up for so long,
Kicking on. Yep.
so let's just shiver a little bit and get
Yeah.
under a blanket and have a good time.
Yeah.
But I wanna pull on the thread a little bit of, you mentioned the word programming, and nowadays I think this is a very interesting topic just because, again, I talk about social media a lot on here, but I do think there's a big piece where most people are on social media. Most people who are on social media follow people that they compare themselves to, aspire to be like, all of those things. I understand that there's certain social norms that are like, it's good that we do have certain like societal norms so that, it's
Right.
not okay to do some pretty terrible things.
Right.
But what's your take, or what have you seen, like if someone has programming that really is not useful to them or their life, what are ways that you've seen people or yourself be able to overcome certain programming that is like it's latched on, it's stuck there, but it serves no purpose anymore?
Right.
And it really probably keeps them from being the most authentic version
Yep.
of who they can be.
Right. Like I'll speak personally. Like I wasn't a crier because I was always like raised like emotion wasn't like a huge thing in my family. It was really more cold. I don't think like I ever saw my dad cry. Like
Mm.
you never had that, and it was always like suck it up and just be tough and
Rub some
like,
dirt on it.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And then honestly, I grew up more in a neighborhood with guys. I had more guy friends in college, and so it's always like you'd always hear them talk about girls being like, "Oh my gosh, she's so sensitive, she cries." And so I was like, "Ooh, I should not be that emotional
Mm.
person. Like I should just be that strong, like don't cry, whatever." Like that's so honestly toxic for our body, our health, everything. Cuz truly, we're like meant to shed tears. We're meant once
Mm-hmm.
again to feel an emotion, like natural things happen that you cry and like it's a release. And I mean, honestly, too, Chinese medicine, the liver. they say when you cry, you're like cleansing your liver. Like that's an emotion. Like when we're holding all of that stuff, it's like actually causing like harm to our liver. Like just in my own experience with like Chinese medicine and going to acupuncture for years and stuff and researching all of that kind of that stuff. And so just normalizing crying over like sometimes it's tears of gratitude, you know? And so somebody calls them gratitears, and it's like, yeah, like just and like happiness and like just the things that affect us and like normalizing crying. I cry more now. I probably cry almost every day in like some way, shape, or form. Whether it's meditation of just like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for this new opportunity. I'm so grateful for like that this happened, you know, like all of the things like that are happening in life, or like wow, this really makes me sad and angry, you know? It's like just like allowing myself to cry and normalizing that like we're meant to feel.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it is that thing of like it's the energy emotion. You feel it and you release it and you let it go and then it moves on. We're not also supposed to sit in like a week long puddle of like life is terrible. I'm going to sit and like no, it's like, okay, like feel and let it go. A lot of people who sit in that is because like this is years worth of things that they're sitting in now and whatnot. But I think honestly, it's the programming of like, you should just suck it up, right? Or truthfully, a lot of women feel that it's like we're taught like we're too emotional and we're too sensitive. And, you know, working with a lot of women, like they've always been like, oh, you're so sensitive. You like, I can't say anything without you crying, you know? And so then they start to stop and suck that up. But once again, then we're holding that in our body. No matter if you express it or not, it exists.
Yeah.
You're just existing and now you're holding it all in. And even so, from like the male perspective of like how it's been normalized that guys are supposed to be tough. They don't cry. They don't shed any tears. They're supposed to be the rock. Hence the reason they have more heart issues, more heart attacks, more like problems. Because what is that doing? You're holding all of that in, and the pressure of all of that, it expresses itself in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And so it's like, when do we get to normalize that men are human too? They have feelings, they cry, like allowing that to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's so interesting about you saying that too, there goes my phone, is so even back when I was just doing the personal training side, once a month I would do sit downs with my clients and I would just check in and kind of just go over like, how's life going? How are you feeling? And I would dig a little bit, and a lot of times people would cry, and every single time someone cried, they would apologize for crying.
Yes.
And that was something I did. Like I kind of picked up on it. I was like, why do people? And then in my personal life, I had it a couple times where someone would start tearing up and they're like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's like, are you sorry for doing it? Are you sorry that you feel you're making me uncomfortable?
Right.
Like what is it that people are apologizing for? And I do think it is because, and it goes back to this super simple thing that I think about all the time, which is when someone asks how people are doing, automatic response, good, how about you?
Yes.
And it's like, are you doing good? You don't
Yes.
seem like it. And so
Yes.
I think it's just that it's the automatic assumption that you're supposed to not bring your problems to the public. Like it's like fight your battles in silence and figure it out. And to your point, that is just such a toxic, garbage-filling trait to where eventually, like what happened with me the last couple weeks where it was, and I even was pretty intentional about, I sent a message out to a good amount of the people that I like love, respect, care about, and I let them know, I was like, this is going to be a really stressful next few weeks.
Yeah.
I want to let you all know, like, if I am acting different, that's why. It's because I'm in a spot where it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, there's some stressful stuff coming down the pipeline, and even just saying, like, it's not a cry for help. It's not anything like that. It's just, this is where I'm at. I respect you. I want you to know where I'm at.
Which is interesting because a mentor of my boyfriend and I, is he just did a podcast on that. His name's Chris Harder, and he talked about like being in seasons, and he's in a busy business season, building like this app and whatever. And he literally told a lot of friends and families of like, I'm in a season. Like, this is nothing personal. I'm not a bad, like you just took over this studio. You have like intentions for like what you're creating with your business. And we get to go through seasons, and we also get to express like, this is where I'm at. This is what you can expect from me or not expect from me.
Yep.
And holding like, I hate using boundaries, but these loving boundaries with people of like, you might not see from, I might not be able to hang out with you as much right now. Like, it will be a season. This too shall pass, but I just need to focus on whatever.
Yeah. Well, and a big piece of it was I put in the message, and it's very true, has been true for me in the past, and I think is true for a lot of people, where I said, I'm just so used to fighting battles in the shadows and figuring it out to the point where I'm over the hill, and then I can come talk about it and make it public. But it as things have leveled up, it just, that quote in my head of, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I was like, well, I've gone pretty fast. Now I want to see how far I can go. And so it's time to start leaning on people, asking for help. And that's another, I don't even want to say it's just for men. I think it's for everybody, that asking for help can be a really tough thing too if you're programmed as a giver personality, which we talked about a little bit. If you're so used to being, and this is very true for me, and I've talked about this a lot with friends recently, I'm someone who I like to be the person people go to for help. It provides me a sense of significance. It makes me feel good to be able to help someone out, which I think is true for most people. But when identity is attached to that, it makes it very difficult to reverse it and be the one to ask for help. And I really think if people can be brave enough to, again, even if it's like I'm talking about, just be brave enough to tell someone, I'm stressed this weekend. If you don't hear from me, it's because I'm stressed and I got stuff I need to figure out. And just, again, breaking a couple of these programs that in turn do hold stuff in that needs to be released or shared or whatever.
Society, I don't even know how we've gotten here, but we've gotten so far away from, in my opinion, our true nature. If you think back in time, it was communities, it was tribes. Like, everything was done as a community. Tribes raised children. It wasn't a single mom and dad. Like, there's so much of that. Like, and now it's like there became this like pride of being self-built. Like, I did all of this myself. I built this business myself. I accomplished this. I raised the kids by like, it became this like weird badge of honor, but yet it's been so detrimental to us in so many ways. Think about like how much stress we have. We don't get sleep. We don't get proper nutrition. We don't get all of those things because we're overextending ourselves in the time we have in a day to do everything ourselves. And yet we like became this badge of honor of like, look at what I did all by myself. But like, really, it's not sustainable. It's why we're so unhealthy. We don't get enough sleep. We don't get we're really not meant to go through life alone. We're not meant to do everything alone. We're not meant to raise children alone. We're not, if you think back in time, and in a lot of cultures where they're actually the happiest and probably more healthy, like it's a community.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it makes me think of, there's a lot of darkness from the Native American tribes and their internal beef and everything. I'm not a history buff, so don't like quote me on all of this, but that is something that I've always respected, is that tribe mentality of you have 100 to 150 people, everyone has 100% buy-in. You make something that I just appreciate is like people have a role. So it's not like everyone tries to do everything. It's you have, and I think this is very true for friend groups. It's like you have the person who's maybe the planner. You have the person who brings the spunk and the spontaneity. You've got the person who's a good advice giver and just a good person to kind of like shoulder to lean on. And again, I think obviously a lot of modern technology has solved the solutions for needing, 150 people to do survival tasks. But now it's shifted into a lot of growth oriented living and like spiritual connection oriented living for people who choose that style.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of that, I mean, this is a good example. You have a background in breathwork. I have a background in mindset coaching. We could probably run each other through 20 sessions and still barely scratch the surface of how we could benefit from the relationship. And so I very much agree with that and it is so interesting, right? When someone says I'm busy, there's almost like a humble brag that comes with it.
So I've also been a dental hygienist for 21 years and I still work part-time as a hygienist. And like, honestly, that is one word that like drives me crazy and gets under my skin because I see how many patients a day and I come back and be like, how are you? Oh my gosh, so busy. In my opinion, busy describes nothing. What are you busy doing? Are you busy napping?
Yeah.
Like, what does busy mean? Like, truthfully, I'm like, so I always poke at it because I'm like, so you busy having fun, busy working? Like, what are you busy doing? Because it becomes this blanket statement that people use of like, I'm busy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so busy. And I'm like, but then it's like, how is that always received too by like people who are close to you? Like, how have you been? Busy. Then you're like, oh, they're so busy. I don't want to bother them. They don't have time for me. Like, and once again, I come back to, I'm like, what does it really describe?
Yeah.
What are you busy doing? Like I said, you could be busy napping.
Well, and that's what's so funny about it is I was definitely, and I still kind of am part of that problem where, gotta clean out my eye a little bit. Like there are periods of my life where I do get very busy, but every time I say it, I'm like, oh, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
And it really is. I mean, this was something I talked about in my workshop. I've talked about with a couple of my clients this past month is if you truly believe you have no time, I'm happy to sit down with you with a weekly schedule and fill in every hour of every day and see how do you spend your time. Yeah. Because odds are there's things that you're doing that are just out of a sense of comfort to hold you back from pushing your chips in and like doing what you need to do to grow. And so one of my clients took me up on it, and admittedly she is very busy, but I was like, look, you've got 3 hours this one day that you can devote entirely to this thing. And if you do that every single week for the next 10 weeks, you're going to see a big difference. Yeah. And so it's like, as busy as someone is, either you're putting things in your schedule that don't need to be there, or you're not as busy as you think you are. Yep. But yeah, that's always an interesting one for me.
Yeah, busy's an interesting word. It totally is. No, and just circling back to like you said, like on social media and like comparison, and you had made the comment about, that's one of the biggest time sucks too. I mean, if you ever nobody wants to look, but this lovely phone does tell you how many times you pick it up and how much time you spend on it. Yeah. If you really want to talk about where your time is going. I mean, we're all embarrassed and we're all guilty of it in so many ways. But it's like coming back to the comparison. What are you taking in off of social media? It can be good and it can be not so good, you know? I always tell people, like, what are you consuming with that? Because I'm guilty and I'm always like, I'll say it in a good way because I'm very conscientious of who I follow. And I've learned from so many, I'll say, mentors that don't know their mentors on social media. Yeah. Because I've learned so much about them and so much about like breathwork, I follow other people who are far beyond me in breathwork and have learned so much via that as a vehicle. But then also it's like we can get caught up in the not sharing how we really are or really feel because we always perceive nobody else is feeling that way because social media shows us the highlight reel and we all know this. We all know it, but we forget it.
Yeah,
because
that.
nobody wants to admit that like life ain't great right now. Like, oh, truth, like I was really faced with this years ago when my dad passed away. And once again, being a hygienist, I see all the patients and I see a lot of them, right? I used to see a lot of them regularly. I was living in Colorado and they're always like, hey, Amy, how are you? You're faced in that moment of like, do you lie and say good? Or do I be honest and say, you know what, I'm all right. Like my dad passed away like 2 weeks ago. So I'm like, I'm kind of in it. Right? Because you're faced with that like moment. And that was a true test for me of like, do you show up honestly? Or am I going to, obviously, if it's like somebody new that it doesn't know me, I'd be like, I don't know, like a new patient. But somebody who's like seen me long enough that like they know me, they honestly like care. We've like exchanged, life here and there. And it's like, those are the moments where it's like, but it's interesting when you share. This is one thing I've learned. When you share and you show up authentically and you share, it gives other people permission to do the same. When you say, honestly, this is how I am. Honestly, it's been like this lately. Then it gives other people permission to not scuff it off and just say good too.
Yeah, I would even extend on that. I think with the breathwork stuff that you do too, I think showing up with light, authentic energy gives people the permission to do the same.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that's also one of those things where I love being a fly on the wall. And it was interesting. I don't like to go out to clubs and do all that stuff, but every once in a while my friends are downtown Milwaukee, so I'll go with, and it's just so interesting seeing the masks that people wear. And like I feel like the more work you do with this, the more obvious the mask is. And so it's always so refreshing in an environment like that to feel the energy and see the actions of someone who's just in the moment and being their just genuine self, raw expression. And I think it's a really impressive permission slip that they're sliding to everyone else in the room saying, hey, you can just be you. And that's cool. No one's, even if people judge you, it's like they're judging you from a spot of unauthenticity.
Right. And usually they wish they had the confidence to be like that as well. There's this like judgment, but usually that underlying judgment comes from like, I wish I had the confidence to be like that person who's just totally themselves in whatever that expression is, you know? But it
100%.
Totally is.
So we're coming up on the hour mark. So I'm going to wrap up. I got 2 questions that I'm curious to ask you.
Sure.
So the first one is, if you could give anyone who listens to this, and if you made it to this point, thank you. That's very impressive. If you could give one piece of advice to whoever's listening on the other side of this, one action step or thing they can start doing or stop doing to move the dial towards becoming the best version of themselves, what challenge would you give them or advice would you give them for them to do to start leveling up?
Breathe. Like truly breathe. It sounds so crazy, but like tap into your breath. Like the one thing, your breath, it's always available. It's always free. Just tap in. Like the power of your breath, as you just experienced. I'm like, as I always tell clients who come out of a breathwork journey and they look at me, they're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you did that. Like what you just experienced today, that was you and your breath. I played the music. I guided you through it. But like at the end of the day, that was strictly you and your breath. Of everything you just got to experience, that was all you.
And it's wild. I think, because I fully plan to, after you leave the studio, I'm just going to sit and journal about that, because it's a profound experience. Like it's one of those things. There's definitely surrender needed to get the full experience. Like I noticed for a couple of breaths, I was just doing the breath and kind of like fighting it a little bit. And then finally that stuff came up with my low back and it was like, all right, it's time to start surrendering. And and again, I think obviously if you have someone who knows what they're doing, who can set the experience right and guide it for 45 minutes, that's where you're really going to see some crazy improvements. But like you said, even if you have a stressful day, taking 45 seconds to do some breathing and just reset a little bit is huge.
Even like laying down at bed, I'm like, so many people struggle falling asleep or struggle with sleep. And I'm like, when you lay down in bed at night, like take 10 nice deep breaths and imagine like that exhale is letting go of the day. Like every thought that comes up, every emotion, every like thing you're replaying in your head, like letting that go and calming the nervous system is like, you'd be amazed at how that can change like you falling asleep.
Yeah. Natural drug.
Yep.
Gotta love it.
Yep.
And then the last question I have for you. So for you right now in your life, what's something that you're working on or hoping to start learning that'll help you move up and become the next best version of yourself?
Honestly, like, you know, people have words of the year and I am like, do I do that or not? Yes. Truthfully is a deeper faith in everything. Faith first in myself and my inner knowing, the wisdom and the knowledge that I have from this lifetime and past lifetimes, I'll say, and just having a deeper faith first in myself and then in others and in the collective and in the communities, because like it's rough out there, but I just have faith that like things are like always shifting and everything's working out for us. Everything's happening for a reason. And just having that faith and remembrance of who I truly am. Beyond the beliefs, beyond what I'm told, beyond the projections, beyond all of the noise and the chaos, a remembrance of who I am and why I'm here and what is my purpose in this lifetime. And that is to share a lot of this with people, and in whatever way, shape, or form that is, you know? And so it's like that's really what I'm anchoring in, what I'm focused on every day is a deeper faith in myself, and then the remembrance of who I am and what I'm here for and what is my purpose in this lifetime. Like, what's my mission? Why am I here?
That's powerful. That's amazing. I'll add that as a challenge for everyone is, it is definitely something that I'm glad you said that, because I'm working on the faith part more, is just with the beliefs that I have about life, the universe, spirituality.
Yeah.
There is a lot of deep-rooted faith that comes with it, but it's, for me, I think about it like if there's a storm in the ocean, the waves are going to be crashing up top, but there's still stillness deep. But now my thing is, all right, let's start bringing that stillness and faith to the surface of everyday experiences. So that's really powerful. I'm glad you said that, because that was something I needed to hear too.
Yeah.
So
I mean, faith is like that everything's always working out for you in the greater good, even when it's like the hard stuff and it's like, wow, this is crappy, or like, dang, like you're learning a lesson. It's a lesson you needed to learn. It's bringing up something that's like getting you to where you need to be, and being like, you know, they always say like it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And it's like having faith that like everything's here for a reason, you know, faith that you and I connected for a reason, faith that like where you know, I always just have like that deeper sense of faith that and that trust, because life is full of uncertainty. Like there is a zero guarantee. And like, what do you like, just having that deep rooted faith? And I think you have to have faith in yourself first. Like you have to just trust yourself and trust everything about you first.
Amen.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for hopping on and for the breathwork session.
Yeah.
So for people who are in the Heartland, Pewaukee, anywhere drivable distance from the studio area, Amy is going to be doing free breathwork sessions for people here. We want to just show all of you the power of what this can do for you, whether it's something in your external life that's causing stress, whether you've just felt off or unbalanced. very similar to how I was feeling, and
Yeah.
let me tell you, it definitely helped. So what we'll do is we'll put in the description, in the comments, or wherever that is in the description, there will be a link and an email address so that if you're interested, you can contact me or contact Amy, and we'll make sure that we get you set up. So that'll be starting in February, and then we'll probably do a workshop at some point as well to run people through it. But you will see Amy in the studio. I'm so excited to have her use this space because after seeing what she can do, it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you for being here. I'm so happy we met.
Yes.
For everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. As I will always say, I think anyone who devotes and commits time to listening to things like this, I have so much respect for it. I have so much appreciation that you trust us and you trust what we have to say to help you out. I know that there were things in here that can. All I will ask now is if you have questions, comments, or concerns, that's why there's a comment section. If you liked it, anything that we talked about, that's why there's a like button. And if there's someone in your life that you think could benefit from just hearing this conversation, that is why there's a share button. And then if you're not subscribed, that's why there's a subscribe button. I think that's everything. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. Catch you next time. Peace.